Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to World of Tanks Blitz, and today I will be giving a new garage review of this thing, the Challenger, which is the Tier 7 British turreted tank destroyer. It was introduced with the Firefly and all that line, and it's a tank that not many people talk about, and when they do it's not kindly, to be perfectly honest, and there's a good reason for that, and I will go over them as I go over the tank here. So, starting out then, it's got 1060 HP, that is with the improved assembly. If we take that off, it has got exactly 1000 HP. Now if we have a look at, do I have any other turreted tank destroyers? I don't believe I do. Oh no, I do have Blaze, the Blaze WZ, which has got 1060. Again, take that off, it is 1000. The Helsing with 1000 HP again. If we have a look at some of the non-turreted tank destroyers, the Jagdpanther has got 1050, not with improved assembly. ISU 122S has got 1000 HP. So it's sort of in the midline of pretty much everything, whether it's turreted or not tank destroyers. It's sort of pretty much in mid, which is alright for tank destroyers. Obviously the AT7 will beat it on HP, but even so it has got a fairly decent amount of HP. You will of course die quicker than most because you are a tank destroyer. They've got, what, the second least amount of HP in the game as a class, so there is that. As for armour as well, absolutely nothing. 50 frontal turret, 40 side, 50 rear, 88 frontal hull, 50, 38 rear. Something to note, however, is that the stock turret has got obviously slightly less HP. It goes down to, what, 960 HP? But it does get slightly better frontal turret armour at 101, but even so it is very flat with the stock turret. Now, why do you want to go with the upgraded turret? Well, it's because of the upgraded gun, which is a 20-pounder, which has obviously got higher damage and penetration, but for lower alpha, but for a slower reload rather than the stock gun on this tank. But even so, no matter what turret you use, you're not going to bounce much. Quite honestly, if you get a bounce, consider yourself lucky, because even though it is 101 at the front of the turret, of the stock turret, it is completely flat. So it is 101 flat. There is absolutely very little way that you're bouncing anything off of that frontal turret. Overall, the armour just is not great at all. 252 meters view range. The mobility, however, is pretty good. I've now got this thing up to a 100% crew. So we've got a 37 kilometers per hour average speed, 20 power to weight ratio, with a 18 degrees turret traverse and a 35 degrees hull traverse with a 695 horsepower engine, with that is with engine accelerator. So you take it off and you've got about what, a 33/32 degrees hull traverse, which is so yeah, overall though, mobility, it is fairly mobile. You can keep up with most mediums, etc, etc. It's still a pretty mobile tank. Comparing it to something very mobile like a T23-3, you can see 560 engine, 48.6 hull, 44 turret, and a 15.9 power to weight. So it has got worse average speed and engine power, or power to weight rather. However, it does have slightly better, very better, a lot better I should say, mobility in terms of hull traverse. But overall though, the tank doesn't seem all that special, but it's also not at all that bad either. Now, why am I going into the Comet? Because the Comet is a medium tank. However, the Comet is basically it, but better. There is very little reason to want to own the tank that we've got there when you've got something like the Comet in the game, because the Comet straight away gets better hit points with its top turret with 1200. It also gets better turret armor, and the turret armor is very troll as well, so you can quite easily bounce stuff off the front of the Comet if you hit it in the wrong place on the turret. Turret is very troll. Also gets 12 degrees of gun depression. It gets better power to weight with an extra 1.2 power to weight ratio ish. It gets a lot better hull traverse with its top engine. Not to mention when you upgrade it with the suspension, you'll probably get, I don't know, something like a 50 degrees Hulls reverse, let's say. Plus the turret reverse as well goes at 47, nearly 48 degrees per second. Which makes this thing mostly obsolete, apart from the gun. Now, the gun does have, let's have a look, 10 degrees of gun depression, so it does still have fairly decent gun depression. The top gun here is a 20-pounder. Sorry, Ordnance Quickfire 32-pounder. Sorry, it's not a 20-pounder, it's a 32-pounder. The same as you would see on the Churchill gun carrier, if anyone happens to still own that collector's tank. 3.9 second aim time with 0.33 dispersion, 2,100 DPM, 7.13 second reload time, for 220 average penetration with AP, 252 with APCR, 47 with HE, 250 average damage with AP, 190 with APCR, and 330 with HE. Overall, not too bad of a gun. It's pretty much the same sort of gun as you would get on the gun carrier, except it's in a far more mobile and, let's be honest, better tank than the gun carrier at tier 6. So overall, the 32-pounder is still a fairly decent gun. However, the stock gun is also probably, for some people, a better choice, with an exact 3 second aim time with 0.28 dispersion. It gets an extra 460 DPM, 2,563 DPM with a 3.74 second reload. Average pen does go down to 171 with AP and 239 with APCR, 20 with HE, and also the average damage also goes down to 160 with AP, 135 with APCR, and 200 with HE. Still gets the same 10 degrees of gun depression. And it doesn't matter what turret you use, you're going to get 10 degrees either way. So there's your two options, and both guns are decent guns. It does at least get a good selection of guns on this tank. This one has got better DPM, this one has got better alpha and penetration. And honestly, it's not too bad playing through the tank with the stock 17-pounder. The stock 17-pounder is honestly not too bad of a gun. At tier 7 it is starting to lose its edge, whereas at tier 6 and 5 is where it shines. But at tier 7 and up it starts to lose its edge because that pen just won't quite get through some of the higher tier tanks at tier 7 and 8, namely the heavy tanks, and when this is a tank destroyer that's kind of a bit of a problem. But even so, it is still a fairly decent gun to use on this tank. It really is a choice of whether you want more DPM or more average damage and pen. I've gone with the 32-pounder just because I prefer the higher average damage than the 17-pounder offers, even though it does have a worse DPM and worse reload time. But that is really the main crux of the problem with the Challenger, which is that there's very little that it can do that another tank can't do better in the same tech tree. Namely, this thing gets the same sort of gun. It gets a 20-pounder, which has actually got slightly better average damage, but for slightly worse average damage. But it gets a far better DPM. And I mean, there's the 17-pounder on this tank. There's the same gun as the Comet gets, and so there's very little really that you would want to play the Challenger when you could just play the Comet and get basically the same or even better results. The Comet does lose out in average pen. It doesn't quite have the same average pen as the 17-pounder or the 32-pounder, but it does get a far better DPM of 400 extra DPM, and it also gets slightly better gun traverse, or at least gun depression rather, with its upgraded turret, and the turret armor is generally better in both cases, which makes this thing pretty much obsolete as soon as it came in. It's basically a worse version of the Comet. There's nothing that it can do that the Comet can do better or as good. It's got worse DPM than most things at this tier. It has got decent pen for the tier though. There's very little that can actually beat it in terms of penetration, other than something like the 87 with its upgraded gun. Pretty much, yeah. Even the long 88s on the Germans don't have as much penetration as the 32-pounder does on this tank, or the 20-pounder on the 87. So that's really the only reason that you play this tank, is for the decent average damage and good pen on this top gun. However, if you're playing it with the 17 pounder, then all that goes out the window and you're basically playing a worse version of the Comet. Because it is kind of like a medium tank in that it's fast, mobile, and doesn't have any armour, which is pretty much the British medium tanks at this at sort of mid-tier. They're all pretty much like that. And so, if you want to play a tank like that, just go play a Comet. Really, there's very little reason to play this thing over the Comet. And that's pretty much the crux of it. It does, however, get some pretty decent consumables. You've of course got your standard repair, first aid, fire, you've got your multi-purpose, you've got your adrenaline and your engine power boost. We all know what those do. However, it does get an improved engine power boost, which is more expensive, but instead of adding 20% to engine power, it now adds 50% to engine power, an extra 10% to your turn traverse, 8 km per hour maximum top speed, and 10 km per hour reverse speed for 15 seconds, but for the same cooldown. So it is basically a far better engine power boost, which is unique to these turreted British tank destroyers. The same as reticule calibration, which gives you minus 40% to aim time and minus 40% to gun depression for 20 seconds with a 65-second cooldown, which is pretty useful. So you can go ahead and whack those on if you wish. That is one of the plus points for playing this tank, is that you do get this and this very good consumables on your tank that you can choose to use. As for provisions, you've of course got your standard and improved fuel for 3 and 10% engine power and turret traverse. You've also got black tea and TM pudding for 3 and 10% respectively crew mastery. You've got your protective kit, which is all that lot, and then you've also got spall liner, which is minus 20% of damage from HE shells, which is not too bad of an idea because you do have very low amounts of HP. I'd say it's a fairly regular occurrence that you will get hit by an SU-152 or an ISU-152 or a similar tank, and they will quite easily wipe you off the face of the earth because you have absolutely no defense against their penetration. Because with a shell that big, they can get through your side armor and turret armor very easily with HE. So the spall liner may not be too bad of an idea, but they'll probably still one-shot you through it anyway. So that's just a note. With your 32 pounder, you do carry 90 rounds of ammo. You're never going to run out of ammo with the sort of reload you have on this gun, so you can go ahead and mix those up as you want. As for equipment, definitely gun rammer. Get your DPM up and your reload time down. That's very important. You don't need calibrated shell on this tank with either gun, so go with gun rammer definitely. Improved modules for the extra track durability. You can basically roll around with the medium tanks. Improved coated optics or Comet, it really is a choice. You can either play this tank as a medium tank, which is how I play it, or as a tank destroyer, which is how some people will play it. So if you're playing it as a medium tank, go with coated optics. If you're playing it as a tank destroyer, go with Comet. Enhanced gun lane drive for the extra aim speed. You don't need it on the 17 pounder so much, but you will want it for the 32 pounder. So 32 pounder enhanced gun lane drive, 17 pounder supercharge. Definitely go with improved assembly for extra HP. You have got absolutely no armor, so enhanced armor will do nothing beneficial to you. Engine accelerator for the extra power to weight and slight boost to the hull traverse, but mostly you'll want it for the power to weight. With either gun, you don't need refined gun, so go with vert stabs. Either playstyle, vert stabs is the better choice for out of the 2 tier 3 combat power equipment slot. Enhanced tracks for the extra suspension durability. Honestly, it doesn't really matter with this tank. If you get hit, you're doing something wrong, or you're unlucky, either one. So really is your choice of those two, and then your choice of whatever the hell those two things are. So overall, the Challenger is just a bit of a weird tank. Honestly, it doesn't really have a dedicated area that it does well. It just does everything alright, which means that it just ends up falling out of line with most things. Honestly, there's very little reason to play the Challenger, as I've said, over the Comet when the Comet is still available. The only reason you'd play the Challenger is for the 32 pounder, and if you're not going to play it with the 32 pounder, go play the Comet, because the Comet is at that point just a better tank than this thing at the same tier. So yeah, unfortunately that is my thoughts on the Challenger and the review. I'll thank you all for watching, and goodbye.